Hi, automotive enthusiasts. Welcome to Auto Archive, where today we're diving into a motorcycle that did more than just keep Harley-Davidson's legacy alive. It redefined an entire class of machines. We're talking about the 2015 Harley-Davidson Street Glide, a bagger that stepped out of the shadow of its predecessors and into a new era of performance, comfort, and cultural relevance. When you think about touring bikes, you might picture heavy chrome, wide saddles, and cross-country journeys that take days to complete. But in 2015, Harley pushed that formula further, asking how far they could modernize the bagger without breaking the spell that made it iconic. Riders didn't just want style, they wanted precision, they wanted power, and they wanted a machine that could carry them into the future while still feeling unmistakably Harley. That's the tightrope the Street Glide had to walk, and it's what makes its story so compelling. In this deep dive, we'll explore how the Street Glide evolved into a benchmark for long-haul riders, why the 2015 model marked a turning point in Harley's touring lineup, and what its impact has been on motorcycling culture in the years since. We'll trace the roots that made the bagger format resonate with American riders, then unpack the Project Rushmore innovations that transformed the ride experience, and finally look at the ripple effects this bike created across the industry. What makes this more than just another Harley story is the cultural weight attached to baggers. These motorcycles aren't just tools for travel. They're expressions of identity, freedom, and mechanical artistry. By 2015, Harley was under pressure from shifting demographics and rising competition. The Street Glide became the company's answer, blending traditional lines with modern refinements in a way that would either cement its reputation or expose it as outdated. Riders debated fiercely whether this new generation of Harley touring bikes could stay true to the DNA of the brand. The stakes weren't just about sales, but about Harley's ability to remain a cultural touchstone. Today, we'll break down what the 2015 Street Glide represented at launch, how it rode and why it mattered, and how its influence has spread far beyond its production year. By the time we're done, you'll see why many believe the 2015 Street Glide wasn't simply another model year. It was the bike that redefined what a bagger could be, and in doing so, helped Harley chart its course into the modern era. The story of the 2015 Harley-Davidson Street Glide begins with understanding what baggers meant before this model arrived. These motorcycles were the workhorses of long-distance travel, dressed in chrome and tradition, but often criticized for being more about presence than performance. For years, riders accepted quirks like buffeting winds behind the batwing fairing or brakes that demanded anticipation, because Harley's mystique outweighed its flaws. But by the early 2010s, competition was surging. Indian motorcycles had returned with modernized touring bikes. Japanese manufacturers offered bulletproof reliability, and younger riders wanted technology that made sense on the open road. This was the moment Harley had to decide whether to stay the course or evolve. The Street Glide became the proving ground for that gamble, and Project Rushmore was the mechanism to make it happen. Microstory. In the run-up to 2015, Harley engineers studied how riders actually used their touring machines. One small detail they noticed was how riders stretched out their arms to combat wind buffeting at highway speeds. It wasn't just discomfort, it was fatigue that could end a trip early. Out of that observation came the reshaped batwing fairing with a central vent that calmed the turbulence. On paper, it seemed minor, but on the highway it was transformative, letting riders stay relaxed for hours instead of minutes. That's the kind of change that doesn't show up in chrome catalogs, but it altered the riding experience in a profound way. Context digest. The Street Glide had already been Harley's top-selling model before 2015, so the stakes were immense. Any change risked alienating the loyalists who kept Harley's image alive in American culture. At the same time, failing to modernize risked losing ground to rivals who were eager to capture that audience. Harley wasn't just refreshing a motorcycle. They were recalibrating the balance between heritage and progress, a dance the company had rehearsed for decades, but never with stakes quite this high. Microstory. The brakes became another battlefield. Older Harley touring bikes had a reputation for stopping eventually, which wasn't exactly confidence-inspiring with hundreds of pounds of machine and rider barreling down the highway. With the 2015 Street Glide, linked braking systems and stronger calipers gave riders real control without losing the mechanical feel that purists demanded. Suddenly, panic stops weren't sheer terror, and that change earned nods from critics who had long dismissed Harley touring bikes as beautiful but impractical. The message was clear. This wasn't just the same old Harley with new paint, reflection bridge, The Street Glide's transformation was as much about psychology as mechanics. It had to convince riders that modern improvements could actually deepen their sense of freedom, not dilute it. Microstory. Infotainment might seem like the least Harley word you could imagine. Yet the 2015 Street Glide introduced a full touchscreen system with navigation, Bluetooth, and voice control. For traditionalists, it was a shock to see technology usually associated with cars planted into a Harley cockpit. But for touring riders logging hundreds of miles, being able to control music or map a route without pulling over was a revelation. It also signaled that Harley was finally paying attention to how riders lived in the 21st century, not just how they looked on a poster. Context digest. The move toward infotainment reflected larger shifts in consumer expectations. By 2015, even compact cars came with touchscreens, so motorcycles without them began to feel outdated. Harley's gamble wasn't just about rider convenience, it was about aligning their machines with modern lifestyles. This was a cultural update as much as a mechanical one, designed to show that Harley riders didn't have to choose between old-school cool and modern functionality. Microstory. Underneath all the visible updates was the high-output twin-cam 103 engine. It wasn't a revolution, but it delivered more torque, smoother roll-on power, and a feel that resonated with the kind of low-end grunt Harley fans adored. This wasn't about top speed. It was about carrying a passenger and luggage up a mountain pass without breaking a sweat. Riders felt that confidence, and it reinforced the sense that this was still a Harley first, even as it embraced new ideas. The 103 didn't erase tradition. It amplified it. Reflection bridge. What makes the 2015 Street Glide fascinating is how it balanced subtle engineering refinements with bold cultural statements, creating a motorcycle that asked whether tradition and progress could finally ride together. Context digest. Reactions were divided, but telling. Longtime Harley owners admitted the Street Glide felt smoother, more stable, and easier to live with. Meanwhile, new riders who had dismissed Harley as outdated suddenly saw a touring machine that made sense. This dual appeal was rare in motorcycling, where change often pleases one group while alienating another. Harley's careful tuning of the Street Glide became a case study in how to evolve without abandoning identity. Microstory. One rider summed it up not with numbers or specifications, but with endurance. He rode cross-country on both a pre-Rushmore Harley and the 2015 Street Glide. The difference wasn't about getting there faster, but about arriving less exhausted, with energy to actually enjoy the destination. That single trip illustrated what Harley had achieved, not a reinvention, but a redefinition of what comfort and control could mean in a bagger. Multiply that story across thousands of owners, and you see how the Street Glide earned its place in Harley lore. As the Street Glide settled into this new role, the question shifted from how Harley would change the bagger to how the bagger would change Harley, setting the stage for the broader impact this model would have across the entire industry. The wider impact of the 2015 Street Glide didn't unfold overnight. It spread like ripples through the motorcycling world, altering how riders, competitors, and even Harley itself thought about the touring category. With the bagger redefined, the industry suddenly had a new benchmark, and that meant responses had to come fast. Indian Motorcycles leaned heavily on its revived Chief and Chieftain models, while Japanese manufacturers doubled down on reliability and sleek, modern design. Yet none could ignore what Harley had pulled off, a bike that looked like the past but rode like the future. That tension is where the Street Glide's influence became undeniable. Microstory. Dealers reported an interesting pattern in the years after 2015. Younger buyers, many in their 30s and 40s, were walking into Harley showrooms asking specifically about the Street Glide. They weren't necessarily lifelong Harley fans. They were riders who wanted long-distance comfort, tech features, and unmistakable road presence. The Street Glide became a kind of gateway, proving that Harley could resonate with riders who had grown up with sport bikes or adventure bikes. This broadened appeal gave Harley a fighting chance to grow its base beyond aging loyalists. Context digest. Harley's challenge in the 2010s wasn't just selling motorcycles. It was selling relevance in a shifting cultural landscape. Baby boomers had built the brand into an icon, but their numbers were dwindling. If Harley couldn't connect with new generations, the whole identity of the company was at risk. The 2015 Street Glide, by balancing heritage and progress, became a strategic answer to that existential challenge, offering proof that Harley could adapt without abandoning its DNA. Micro-story. For custom builders, the Street Glide's arrival sparked a wave of creativity. The stronger platform, smoother ride, and integrated tech made it an ideal canvas for big wheel conversions, stretch saddlebags, and elaborate paint jobs. The aftermarket exploded, and bike shows across the US saw a surge of radical Street Glide customs. What Harley had delivered as a refined touring bike quickly morphed into the backbone of a whole new custom culture, one that blurred the line between performance and art. Reflection bridge. The Street Glide had stopped being just a model year and started becoming a movement, its presence reshaping how riders thought about personalization, technology, and tradition all at once. Micro-story. Magazine reviewers in 2015 were cautious at first, but as long-term tests rolled in, the praise grew louder. Riders clocked tens of thousands of miles and found the bike held up not just in style, but in dependability. Critics who once dismissed Harleys as unreliable relics admitted that the Street Glide represented a different chapter. That shift in critical perception mattered. It gave Harley credibility in spaces where it had often been written off as a nostalgia brand. This was a reputational turning point as much as a technical one. Context digest. Competitors quickly reacted. Indian added more technology and creature comforts to its touring line. Honda doubled down on the Gold Wing's refinement. Even brands like Yamaha leaned into bagger-styled models. The Street Glide had forced the entire motorcycle industry to reconsider what the touring format demanded. A rising tide doesn't lift all boats evenly, but in this case, Harley's push for evolution dragged the entire market into a more competitive and exciting place. Micro-story. Owners themselves told stories that underscored the impact. One described riding with a group of friends on mixed bikes, Gold Wings, Roadmasters, and a 2015 Street Glide. At the end of a 600-mile day, the Harley rider wasn't the one complaining of fatigue. That lived experience, repeated across countless group rides, cemented the Street Glide as not just another Harley, but a serious touring machine that could run with anyone. The pride riders felt in proving skeptics wrong became part of the model's cultural currency. Reflection bridge. Beyond engineering or sales figures, what the Street Glide offered was proof that Harley could still lead rather than follow, and that renewed sense of leadership resonated far beyond one model year. Context digest. The numbers backed up the stories. Harley remained the top-selling touring brand in the US, and the Street Glide consistently topped its charts. More importantly, its success bought Harley time to rethink its lineup, explore new segments, and reassure shareholders that the brand could remain vital. Without the Street Glide's success, Harley might have struggled even more severely during the industry downturns of the late 2010s. Micro-story. By the end of the decade, the Street Glide had earned another legacy. It became the bike that unified generations. Older riders appreciated the refinements, younger ones respected the modern touches, and together they kept Harley at the center of American touring culture. At rallies like Sturgis and Daytona, the sea of Street Glides proved that this wasn't a passing fad. It was the new face of the Harley touring identity. As the influence of the 2015 Street Glide spread, the narrative shifted once again, setting up the question of what kind of legacy this redefined bagger would leave not just for Harley, but for the culture of motorcycling itself. Legacy is a tricky thing in motorcycling, because it isn't only about the machine, it's about the riders, the roads, and the culture that grows around them. The 2015 Harley-Davidson Street Glide managed to build a legacy on all three fronts. For Harley, it proved the company could evolve while holding on to the very core of what made its bikes iconic. For riders, it was the reassurance that a bagger could be both heritage-driven and future-ready. And for the culture, it cemented the idea that baggers were no longer just comfortable tourers. They were statements of style, engineering, and identity. Micro-story. A rider who bought a 2015 Street Glide new still talks about the way the bike transformed his annual road trips. Before, riding 500 miles in a day was a grind. After, it became a joy. He describes the satisfaction of rolling into small towns, the rumble echoing off buildings, knowing the machine beneath him had carried him effortlessly across states. That combination of ease and presence is exactly what Harley wanted to deliver. and it became part of the model's enduring reputation. Context digest. Touring bikes often age differently from sport bikes or cruisers. They're judged not only by performance, but by how well they endure years of road time. The Street Glide's design, comfort, and mechanical dependability helped it stay relevant long after 2015. In fact, many of those bikes are still on the road today, commanding respect at rallies and maintaining strong resale value. That longevity strengthens its legacy as more than just a transitional model. It became a reference point for what touring riders expect. Micro story. The ripple effect of the 2015 Street Glide extended to Harley's corporate strategy. The success of the model encouraged the company to double down on Project Rushmore principles, influencing later models and setting the tone for further modernization. Without the Street Glide's success, Harley might have hesitated to invest in technology-forward updates, but its popularity gave the green light for progress. In that sense, this single model year became a pivot point for the brand's broader trajectory. Reflection bridge. The legacy of the Street Glide was not frozen in 2015. It became a living influence, guiding both riders' expectations and Harley's decisions well into the future. Microstory. Among customizers, the 2015 Street Glide lives on as one of the most versatile canvases Harley ever produced. Builders pushed the boundaries of what a touring bike could look like, and entire subcultures blossomed around stretched bags, big wheels, and wild paint schemes. The bike's core stability meant that even heavily modified versions rode with confidence. This dual role as both showroom-ready tourer and custom platform solidified the Street Glide's cultural impact, ensuring it wasn't just a consumer product but also a creative muse. Context digest. Beyond Harley, the 2015 Street Glide influenced how other brands thought about connecting with riders emotionally. Competitors realized that technology alone wasn't enough. It had to be integrated in a way that respected the rider's sense of identity. Harley had shown that cultural resonance was as important as engineering numbers, and that lesson reshaped the bagger class across the industry. The result was a more vibrant, competitive touring market where riders benefited from broader choices and better machines. Microstory. Years later, owners of the 2015 Street Glide gather at rallies and share stories of epic rides, of bikes that have carried them across mountain ranges, deserts, and endless highways. These machines, now with tens of thousands of miles, still hold their heads high among newer models. The pride in those stories reflects the bike's ability to outlast trends and prove its worth over time. It became not just a purchase, but a partner in life's biggest adventures. Reflection bridge. What endures from the Street Glide is the proof that motorcycles can evolve without losing their soul. And that lesson continues to echo across Harley's lineup and the wider motorcycling world. Context digest. By looking back on the 2015 Street Glide, one sees not just a model year but a milestone. It was the moment Harley committed to bridging past and future, to delivering bikes that could satisfy loyalists while intriguing newcomers. In a landscape where heritage brands often struggle to modernize, Harley found a path forward. That path was paved, quite literally, by the Street Glide carrying riders mile after mile, year after year. Micro story. Perhaps the strongest sign of its legacy comes from the used market. Even today, the 2015 Street Glide remains sought after, with riders paying premiums for well-kept examples. That demand isn't simply about the machine. It's about owning a piece of history, a bike that represents the moment Harley found its balance between evolution and tradition. For many, it isn't just a motorcycle. It's a symbol of what Harley can be when it embraces change wisely. The 2015 Street Glide's legacy is secure because it didn't try to be something it wasn't. Instead, it refined, modernized, and amplified what Harley touring had always promised. It gave riders new reasons to believe, competitors new targets to chase, and Harley itself a renewed sense of purpose. And in that way, it remains one of the most important baggers of the modern era. Looking back on the journey of the 2015 Harley-Davidson Street Glide, what stands out most is how one motorcycle carried the weight of both tradition and transformation. It began as Harley's response to a market that was shifting under its feet, yet it became more than just a strategic move. It became a redefinition of what riders expected from a touring machine. The Street Glide didn't abandon heritage. It refined it with sharper engineering, smoother performance, and technology that matched the realities of modern life. For many riders, it proved that a Harley could be comfortable for long hauls, stylish enough to turn heads, and modern enough to stay relevant without losing its soul. The lessons of the 2015 Street Glide extend far beyond that single model year. It showed Harley that listening to riders' lived experiences, whether fighting wind buffeting, craving stronger brakes, or wanting better navigation, could lead to real innovations that deepened loyalty instead of alienating it. It showed competitors that baggers weren't static relics but living, evolving machines that demanded constant reinvention. And it showed the broader culture that motorcycles could still embody freedom while embracing the tools of a new century. What's powerful about this story is not just the machine itself, but the way it became a symbol of resilience. Harley faced enormous pressure in 2015, and the Street Glide became a bright spot, a motorcycle that reassured riders the brand still understood them. Even today, owners of that model year proudly tell stories of endless miles and unforgettable journeys, proving that its impact was never just about numbers on a spec sheet, but about lives shaped on the open road. For those who cherish motorcycling as more than transportation, the 2015 Street Glide represents a turning point. It was a motorcycle that proved heritage and innovation can not only coexist, but thrive together, creating a machine that honors the past while carrying riders confidently into the future. Thanks for riding with us on Auto Archive. See you next time, automotive enthusiasts.